to see everyone. Okay, everyone's doing good? Tonight, I had forgotten that I was going to give a talk. I thought about it maybe 15 minutes before. And so we'll see what happens. But we're at the point in the Heart Sutra where Avalokiteśvara, the protagonist, I introduced Avalokiteśvara's practice, and the first few lines, which is the most important part of the Heart Sutra. And what follows is Avalokiteśvara's interlocutor. So this particular bodhisattva of compassion is having a conversation, teaching Shariputra about emptiness. So tonight we get to hear stories of Shariputra. Maybe we can extrapolate some practices from that. Sound okay? So Shariputra is arguably to me, the most important disciple of the Buddha. Now, being in the Chan Zen tradition, the first ancestral master after the Buddha is Mahakāssyapa. So I'm supposed to say he's the most important one. But Shariputra represents wisdom. He was a little bit older than Siddhartha, Shakyamuni, who became Shakyamuni Buddha. And he became the first disciple among the Buddha entrusted with ordaining and teaching the rest of the Sangha. And many times, when the Buddha was feeling ill, or maybe just doesn't feel like talking, he would ask Shariputra to take his place, to ascend to the seat and give a teaching. So he really represents the Buddha's wisdom. Shariputra, just a little background. He has 6 siblings, I believe. And he was born as, I think, the middle one. 3 brothers, 3 sisters. And all of them became arhats, liberated. But Shariputra left the household life when he was young. And he studied with one of the older contemporary teachers, ascetic practitioners, during the Buddha's time. This was a time in which there were different mendicant traditions. Forest-dwelling ascetics, philosophers. They were part of a countercultural movement against the authority and hegemony of the Brahmanical tradition, which centered on the Vedic text. 2 millennium BCE. So this mendicant tradition existed some 500 years before the Buddha's time. bypassing the authority of the Brahmin priest and sought out salvation, methods of awakening by themselves. So some of them engaging extreme ascetic practices, some of them develop philosophical thought. And this particular school of thought that Shariputra studied belonged to, I believe, a kind of materialist existentialism, kind of dialectical, philosophical. And that teacher had passed away. And Shariputra's childhood friend, Modgayayana, and him were chief disciples of this master. Each of them had hundreds of disciples. So it was a pretty prominent, you could say influential. So all of them were kind of part of this mendicant tradition. It's not one, there are many different schools of thought. And they had promised each other, Shariputra and Modgayayana, their teachers are gone. They should seek out other teachers. They haven't found salvation. And if either one of them found a reputable teacher worthy to study with, they should tell one another. And the Buddha at that time, freshly awakened, different than other mendicant teachers who were old. This guy was charismatic. He left the household life at age 28. Within 6 years, Siddhartha reached full awakening and lived a privileged life, forsaken that, abandoned that, and engaging different sort of practices, extreme asceticism, meditative, contemplative tradition, philosophical oriented tradition, and gave all of those up to seek out his path. He was on the verge of his own surrender. None of these traditions were satisfactory. He attained great insights, accomplishments in meditation and other practices, but gave all that up. And at the verge of, that threshold, having given up all those practices, he went back to something quite simple. He found a tree, which later we call the Bodhi tree of his awakening, which is basically a fig tree. Sat underneath and just resorted to something that he practiced as a child, naturally. Just observed what arises without judgment. He vowed not to give up, not to stand up, and if he doesn't find enlightenment, he will just expire under the tree. So, under the morning star, at that threshold, upon seeing a shooting star, he reached full awakening. And he was a princely background from the Shakya clan. At that time, India was not unified. There were these clans vying for power, family clans, and his was Shakya clan. And when he abandoned the princely life, his father sent 5 basically soldiers to guard his son. So these soldiers were, first, they're not really into it. They're just there to, keep an eye on the prince, the ex-prince. And then they really got into it, and they abandoned him because Shakyamuni kind of gave up on asceticism. It's like, you wimp, we should engage in asceticism. So he practiced alone, and then when he reached awakening, he went back to his 5 companions. So all of them were engaging in asceticism. He walked over there, and they basically were saying, okay, we're not going to talk to him. This guy's gave up on the path. Just don't pay any attention to him. As he walked closer, his countenance, the glow, they couldn't help themselves. So the 5 ascetics say, what happened? Did you find a way? Have you become a god? He says, no. Are you a human being? No. What are you? I'm the Buddha. And then gave his first sermon to his 5 companions. One of them caused Shariputra to awakening. What is his name? Ajivajit, I think. I can't remember. So after the Buddha's awakening, his first Sangha, 5 arhats, first turning of the Dharma wheel, the 4 noble truths, suffering, cause of suffering, cessation, and the path. And the cessation part and the path was the main thrust of that teaching. Everyone knows about suffering. Suffering is what propelled the Buddha to give up his privileged life, to find solution to this anguish and the suffering that he witnessed and experienced. And after his 5 companions, they travel with the Buddha, and being part of the mendicant tradition, they basically beg for alms. The Buddha told them to each go their own separate ways to spread the teachings now that they've become liberated. And one of those 5 monks was alms begging, like any other mendicant, but he was very different. His countenance completely at peace, palpable, felt. Shāriputra was in the same town, alms begging, and he saw this person. Everyone that he has witnessed before, practiced and seen, they have not reached awakening. But he saw this person. He've never seen someone so serene before, at peace. He came up to him and said, "Who's your teacher?" So, Shakyamuni, Siddhartha. So, I've heard of him. What did he teach? He says something very simple. He taught the causes and conditions of that which arises, and the causes and conditions of that which ceases. Upon hearing that, no one has taught that before. He taught dependent origination. That things come together and things separate. All things is made of relationships. Right? Other traditions talk about some kind of essentialism. Right? That's like, beneath the phenomena, there is some kind of ground of being, consciousness, or something that I call the pearl analogy. It's just hidden under the muck of, the shell, this and that. You just have to dig through, and then you find that essence. A lot of spiritual traditions teach that. Variously worded phrase, but basically some kind of essentialism. Whether that's a creator, ground of being, within or without, outside ourselves, or some kind of nihilism. Now, the tradition that Shariputra studied was a kind of dialectical existential materialism. Whenever people pose a question to that Shariputra's old teacher, he would use logic, dialectically articulate way to dismantle some kind of positionality. You could call it the kind of evading the question. From the Buddhist sources characterizing Shariputra's old teacher, it was kind of like that. Neither yes nor no, nor both yes and no, neither yes and no. It's like, just give me the damn answer. It's like, is it yes or no? So when Shariputra heard that, this answer of dependent origination, causes and conditions, did not deny existence, nor did it affirm. Right? And it's not eternalism nor nihilism. All things do exist, but they come together because of relationships. Because they come together through relationships, they also cease to be. It's not a kind of permanencies that itself become the causes and conditions of other things. Right? So it's like, this towel that I use. The towel is made up of non-towel. Right? The towel is made up of all these different parts. It's not to say there's no towel, but towel is made up of everything else. Right? But through use, washing, this towel eventually, this towel is made out of fleece. But fleece is just a name. Fleece is made up of other things. Through its use, it loses its qualities. Right? Change. Right? And you turn to something else. So there's no permanent existence, nor is there a permanent non-existence. It just changed to something else. Right? Much like our own experiences, the narratives that we have about who we are. We may reify as solidify into a kind of nice story, selectively usually, picking out, this is who I am. But it continued to go through change as we expose ourselves to new experiences, the stories change. Right? And the stories are made up of all these other experiences. They help us navigate through daily life. I'm this type of person, I'm that type of person. But each moment is new. They go through changes. You know, our views change, our opinions change. So in that, the simple verse, you know, what did your teacher teach? He taught the causes and conditions of how things arise. The causes and conditions of how things cease to be. Upon hearing that, Shariputra reached awakening. Not full awakening. It's what we call stream enter, Shotapana. Entering the stream. The first, in the early Buddhist teaching, the first of the 4 stages of liberation. When he heard that, upon reaching awakening, he was so moved that I found my teacher. But before he went and followed Ajvajit, I think that's the name of the monk. He went to tell his childhood friend, his childhood buddy, Modgayana, who also studied with the same teacher, had hundreds of students of his own. So together, supposedly, they brought 500 of the other traditions converted to the Buddhist Sangha. And both of them, Modgayana, within 7 days, reached full awakening, liberation, arhat. Shariputra, a little bit later, 14 days. Right? And those two, the Buddha declared, even though they were kind of new in the Sangha, the Buddha already had a Sangha, at that time a small Sangha, constituted by his family members actually. You know, the first thing that he did after reaching Buddhahood is went back to his father's palace and shared his teachings. And his cousin, half-brother, his other cousins, and people just flocked, you know, to him and joined his congregation, left the princely life and the privileged life. So there was already some Sangha, and Shariputra and Moggallana became chief disciples. The Buddha declared, these two will be my chief disciples. The causes and conditions of Shariputra's full arhathood, there's some dispute from textual sources. Early Buddhist text, the Nikayas, the Agamas, talks about him, his full arhathood, when the Buddha gave a teaching on sensations, Vedana, to his family, to Shariputra's family member. The Mahayana text talks about Shariputra as full awakening by contemplating cognition of sight. Cognition of sight. And this appears in the Shurangama Sutra. Now, this is apropos because Avalokiteśvara realized full awakening through what? Do you remember? Sound. And his interlocutor in the Heart Sutra reached awakening through, from the Mahayana perspective, sight. sight and sound are sources of most of our vexations, afflictions. Sight and sound. So often we are kind of duped, by what we see and what we hear. And we give rise to a lot of our stories and constructs based on what we see, what we hear. So from the Shariputra, he's often, his name, his birth name was not Shariputra, but people, when he joined the Sangha, people started calling him Shariputra, the son of Shari, his mother. Mother was called Shari because her eyes are so beautiful, resembling a mythical female bird called Sharika. That's kind of often mentioned in the ancient Vedic tales, And so his association with sight, he himself had beautiful eyes. Sight, what they see, what we see, is quite apropos. And this is something that we can use as a takeoff point to turn it into a practice. This series of Heart Sutra, I focus on practice. We already talked extensively on Avalokiteśvara, contemplation of sound, of hearing. And I spoke about 7 different stages of that. Hearing. Do you all remember? Right? From the practice of listening, beyond just deep listening. Most of us are not even good listeners. When people are talking with us, we're rambling with some notions and ideas already, forming, categorizing, compartmentalizing what they say, filtering everything through our own discriminating mind. So the first step is just listen. Listening to sound, listening to the voice. And then we'll hear something deeper. The sound itself. I spoke about sound itself is a product of discrimination. So as our discriminating mind diminishes, when we listen, the differentiation between sound and silence start to blend, start to merge. Right? Usually people are, they don't like silence. Right? If you're awkward, there's a phrase, awkward silence, right? But silence is a sound. Right? Just like voicing. And going a step deeper, the selectivity based on self-referential preferences, as that diminishes, distinction between sound and silence merge, cease to be. And what's left is just experiencing, hearing, the momentum of hearing. The heard and hearing itself, object, subject, will begin to cease, right? Leading to a unified state. And if one proceed further, rising and ceasing start to cease. Coming and going start to cease. And then further, stage by stage. For ordinary life, just by practicing the first stage is already quite useful. You know? Because in order to really be present to someone, when we hear what they're saying, we really have to be absent. Not absent-minded, but absent of our own judgments. So to be present is to be absent and completely vulnerable and open to what is actually happening without much coloration, preferences. So you can actually hear, and you'll be able to hear where the question is coming from, what they are saying. Most of the time when people are talking, saying, sometimes they have an agenda, sometimes they don't even know what they're saying. You know, like, haven't you hear sometimes in a talk, people ask questions? Some people, they just want to talk. They want to hear themselves talk. Sometimes they're formulating their question as they talk. So they're not really sure. So it's important to really listen, be completely present, completely open. Not so dependent on the words. And you can actually hear their heart. You enter their heart where the question is coming from. So that itself is already useful, but that requires practice. Non-judgmental, completely open, selfless. You know? So that's a particular practice. Right? Contemplation of hearing. In Shariputra's case, contemplation of seeing, of sight. The problem that we usually have is we can't really distinguish between what we see and our overlay narrative on top of what we are seeing. We think what we are seeing is it. This is what we see. Seeing is believing. No. We can't distinguish it. You know? Everyone sees different things. Do you believe it? Yeah. When I was 26, wow, it's a quarter of a century ago. After my first entry into Chan, it was 1996. 97, we started to look for. End of 96, beginning of 97, we started to look for a retreat center, upstate New York, what is now called Dharmadrum Retreat Center. And my mother was a very successful real estate agent. She did 10,000 things, one of which is real estate. Okay, so she was driving us around, looking at different properties. On one retreat, after a retreat, I was still in the retreat mode, and we were driving. The road leading to Dharmadrum Retreat Center. I was sitting in the front seat, my teacher in the back. We see she has stopped the car, and then we were taking a rest on the side of the road. She see, can't go further anyway because there's a big pile of stuff in front. I told this story before. Did anyone remember? That was just, we're all just coming out of the retreat, except my mom. My mom's mind is like one of those tiger moms, 20,000 things happening, you know. So she sees that. As soon as she sees that pile of brown stuff, she's like, how could someone do that? You know, walking their pet and they don't clean up after the pet. Poop, basically. Bunch of stuff. So as soon as you see that, when I was seeing it, nothing was coming up. I was just looking at it. And she's ranting about this and that. And she gets out of the car, thinking she's going to practice the Bodhisattva path. We park the car, we're going to walk to see the property. She's going to clean it up for everyone. So we're still sitting in the car. She's there ranting. She goes over. She felt really justified. You know how those people that feel justified in their judgment of other people who don't clean up? This is a public place. How can you? She goes out there. I was looking at her. She goes over there, she turns around and smiles. So it's not dog poop. And then, so that shift of feelings based on what you saw, in this case, what she saw, it's like immediacy, sudden shift. Here she is going like this. She goes over there. It's not dog poop. Suddenly the feeling completely changed. And I saw that. I was like, small insight. It was like, whew. But just nothing. The whole isn't there a nice Jewish word for this? The whole shebang, whatever. Shtick. The whole shtick, suddenly vanishes. So it's like, our life is like that. Do you believe it? We're not in the right frame of mind to experience that. Oh, my goodness, it's not a bunch of poop. We just kind of follow that. Follow what we see. And then our feelings follow along with that. It's like someone have a noose around our nose. You go left and you go left. You see, pull you to the right, you go to the right. And your feelings are like that. Something favorable, happy. Something unfavorable, how dare they? No autonomy. No self-control. Completely at the mercy of causes and conditions. Causes and conditions are how things arise. Causes and conditions are how things cease. That's exactly how Shariputra was awakened. The subtlety with which our mind, through practice, become ripe to experience the truth of the constructedness. Through just causes and conditions. The truth and simplicity of that. That's what differentiates from puppets, swirled, conditioned, manipulated by the wondrous coming together and changeability of causes and conditions, with no autonomy, no subjecthood, no subjectivity, just a mere product. difference between that, duped by what we see, and someone who is free. Just like the contemplation of sounds. There's a practice that goes through the stages. The first stage in contemplating sight and the cognitive moment that the sight give rise to. So the Buddhist conception of subjecthood, me, I, mine, it's not like the Cartesian understanding of body and mind. Body and mind. I think, therefore I am. It's not this dualistic model. It's more of a tripartite model. The self is made up of not body and mind, of body, mind, and environment. So the Buddhists talked about 6 sense faculty, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. Corpse also have it. Freshly died person. That's insufficient. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought. That's also insufficient. Right? So 6 sense organs coming in contact at the juncture of 6 sense objects, in that moment giving rise to 6 corresponding cognitive moments. That's what constitutes human being. So it's psychosomatic, socially constructed. We exist because of everything. As soon as you take in consideration of the environment, the whole environment we're interconnected, interdependent. So the practice of sight in the scheme of what is called the 18 realms, 6 sense faculty, 6 sense object, 6 corresponding cognitive moment to moment to moment to moment consciousness. At the juncture of the 18 realms, that is where practice happens. Non-practice is practicing as some fabricated, abstracted notion of what you think spiritual practice is. It's just an idea, oh, this is spiritual practice. Right? Practice is always at the juncture. At the juncture. At the contact points. And we're moment to moment contacting everything. Like all of you see me. At this juncture, the first thing is to recognize overlays. Our construct, our simulation of what we think we're seeing. Give yourself some distance from that. Give yourself some space. Could be not. Right? Because it is usually at the junctures that this automatic reification, solidification of our attached views. That's when it happens. So pay attention to the junctures. So in the contemplation of sight, the first thing is you have to train yourself in simpler situations. This is the practice of direct contemplation. Like looking at nature, looking at a flower, looking at a tree, something that's not so contentious, right? Don't look at your neighbor. Don't look at your boss. Don't look at people that are trigger things. Look at something simple, at a park, just looking. First, clearly see you're not in a state of oblivion. You know what you're seeing. Second, when you're seeing, you learn to relax into the experiencing of seeing. And this is like, the difference is we going out to see something versus allowing what is to be present. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's very simple. Like all of you, close your eyes. Close your eyes, okay? Don't use your eyes. You relax into the experiencing of sitting, right? And now, open your eyes. It's already here. The sight. Isn't that amazing? Everything, all at once, is here. Don't selectively pick this and that. So it's as if sight is here. Okay. So first, choose something simple. Don't change all the time. Right? A prairie, a tree, a blade of grass. You're at a park, just a scenery. Sitting there, relax the body, allow it to be present. Second stage. Third, don't give it a name. That's what kills it. That's what kills it. Oh, that's a tree. What is that? Maybe it's a maple tree or sugar gum tree or something. Don't label it. Words have nothing to do with that. Words are constructs, they're abstractions. Different languages have different ways of naming that. Just seeing. Just seeing. And being. Allow it to be. Right? Developing the spaciousness of mind to allow what you see to just be. I'm going to choose something innocuous. So the fourth stage is not naming, right? Not labeling. Definitely not developing a story around it. Right? So when you discover you're naming things, discriminating between this and that, using words to describe it, what do? We recognize it, because that's, by now, it's basically automatic. As an adult, it's automatic. So just bracket it. Bracket the discriminating mind. Just allowing it to be, to exist, without a name. And you continue to see that, and all kinds of things will come up. You allow all of it. The feelings, the associations, the overlays. You allow all of them to be. Giving space to that without latching on, reifying anything. Then that will begin to translate. If you do this often, you're not zoning out. That will begin to translate to your daily life, in which you are softening your judgment of other people, of events that you see. Right? And you will begin to see all the things that come up. That's yours. It's nothing to do with that. It's really nothing. We bring our own food to the potluck, sort of. It's like everyone bring their own stuff to the feast. Through that kind of practice, we're at the same time not oblivious to what is happening. We know what is coming up, but we're not tethered to it, what's coming up. And we can have some beginning of autonomy. Right? We're not in the mode of reactivity. Someone, like having someone on the nose, on the noose, pulling us left and right. Then we'll begin to see what needs to be done, what can be done. Respond with what is. Instead of bringing our own food to the potluck. This is just a very rudimentary practice, but quite useful. So Shariputra, in the early teachings, awakened full liberation through feelings. It's kind of related to what Mahayana text talks about. It's related to sight, consciousness. Right? Whatever the feelings, the things that come up, unstable, constructed, fabricated, continue to change. Right? Not necessarily bad. Change just means new beginnings. Things are new beginnings, without kind of being completely at the mercy of the baggage of the past. So you can think of it as a kind of freshness. There's great vitality in that. Great vitality in that. Freshness. In the way we are present to people and things. And is fully engaged. Just that simple practice is already quite helpful to us. And this practice is called direct contemplation. Direct contemplation. That juncture, if I were to explain it scientifically, neurologically, what we see is a kind of simulation. Like your brain never really existed outside your skull. What is it actually seeing? Electrical signals. Your retina contacting the occipital cortex, feeding that information to limbic system with all the baggage, short-term memory, long-term memory, constructing what we are actually seeing based on different conditions, like lighting. So all of these things, the brain simulates what it's actually seeing. Right? So what you're basically seeing is your own construct. Now, if something is wrong with the neural pathway, some kind of lesion, you're not going to see something correctly. Right? Like, how many of you have myopic vision? Oh, okay. I have just the opposite. I need reading glasses. So some conditioning in this complex process, it's hampered. So what I see is mediated by that. Now, if I look at, for people that are nearsighted, they look at the pile of stuff on the road. What are they going to see? Right? The people that are farsighted, they look at that pile of stuff. What's he talking about? You know, different. What you see, it's mediated by all these different conditions. You know, let alone all the feelings and the judgments and the stories that you bring. From the very beginning, you're building a story based on very problematic. It's like building a castle on quicksand. The quicksand itself already has problems. You know, the sight, the ability to see, and the stories that we bring. And then just constructing a story. So, developing this ability not to be so tethered to what we see and making a quick judgment about that. It's useful. You know? And, but this happens all the time. All the time. You know, the way that we see how people dress and make a quick judgment. You know, you see someone walking down the street and you decide to cross the street because this person is dressing a particular way. Or you see someone coming this way, you're at the other side. Oh, I want to say hello to this person. You know? All the kind of things we bring so fast. You know. Have some autonomy. Give yourself some space. You gotta practice at the junctures of sight. Junctures of sight. I have some students. She no longer lives here. She used to live here. I used to point out her issues all the time. Maybe that's why I drove her away. I think that's why. But every time we engage in some project, we do some task, go someplace, see some people, it's like the worst scenario. Worst scenario. If we do this, well, what happens if that happens? What happens if this happens? Blah, 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 blah. How many of you know people like that? Something happens, worst scenario. Always worst scenario, right? Whereas, I had this other student, he's no longer here. I don't think I drove him away, but he's like, it's all good. See what happens, you know. Something happens, well, who cares, you know. Right? Each person, so most people are somewhere in the middle, but we have our triggers, you know. Nothing to do with intellect. Nothing to do with intelligence. Nothing. You know. The first student has a PhD. Very good at research. How does she use the research? All the possible negative outcome that could possibly happen if we do this. You know, it's fine. Like when we build this place, like, oh, you can't use spray foam if this happened. And California law had Florida law. We got to research in the Florida law. Like, it's not part of the law. You know. Whereas the other one, really not into research. He's like, just do it and see what happens. You know? You know? So you have whatever baggage that you bring, whatever tendency that we bring to the potluck The practice is give yourself some space to what comes up. Don't automatically fall prey to what's coming up. You just miss that juncture. Just miss the juncture. Whether it's everything's good, facing danger. Everything's good. Just go for it. Do some research. Or we shouldn't do that. We can't do this. We can't do that. We can't do that either. What do we do? Stop it. Stop it. Those old timers here know exactly who I'm talking about. These two people. But give yourself a break. Avail yourself to the vast openness of the space. And allow these things to come. You look at it, could be, maybe not. You're not oblivious to it. And you put it down. Don't name. Don't discriminate. Don't follow. You put it down and you look at what needs to be done, what can be done, without your baggage. That is what the Dharma means by selfless practice. You don't inject yourself in sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought. Just bracket it and look at what needs to be done with the available resources. How to do that. Why? The student A. Oh, forget about that student. If you hang around with the person who's always thinking of the negative side, how would you feel? You want to hang out with that person? We may love that person, yes, but it's not so good, yeah? Or someone else, who's always not going through the prefrontal cortex, just like, yeah, let's just do it, Dangerous, kind of. It affects oneself, also affect the people that we love, people around us. It affects your relationships because you're not really present. You're in your own world. You're carrying around this baggage, this lens that you're constantly looking, and you're looking everything through the lens. Put it down. You have to do this. That's part of the practice. How do we do it? The junctures of life. Sight, sound, two of the most prominent sources of our vexations. So when Shariputra, when the Buddha asked, in this Mahayana text, the Buddha asked 25 of his great disciples to talk about their experience and their practice. Shariputra raised his hand, stood up and says, I recommend the practice of sight and the cognitive awareness, consciousness that emerges at the moment when I touch the object, and that moment, that tripartite experience, contemplate that. That is the entry point to awakening. So that's Shariputra. We've talked about a lot of things. Talk about my mom. We talk about piles of poop. and the overlay that we, stories. And sometimes when we see piles of poop, it's not poop. It's not. We talked about our sense organs, and most importantly, the junctures in which our sense organs contact the sense object. And that covers basically every aspect of life. Sight and sound. Shariputra, sight. With these beautiful eyes, Sharika eyes, Sharika bird eyes. Yeah. Right. So, next month, we'll talk about what Avalokiteśvara says to Shariputra. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Yeah. A little background about Shariputra this time. Yeah. The right hand of Shakyamuni Buddha, chief disciple, the first monk who's condoned by the Buddha to teach, and on the Buddha's behalf. And the Buddha's own son, Rahula, his teacher was Shariputra. Shariputra is featured in many, many texts. Not so much other great arhats, other 10 great arhats, but Shariputra, especially in Prajnaparamita. Him and Subhuti. Subhuti's understanding of emptiness, number one. Shariputra, wisdom, number one. So we see Shariputra quite a bit in especially this series of Prajnaparamita literature. Sutra is part of that genre. So understanding how people engage in practice. They're not just a literary figure. They were living people. And this is how they practice. So this is something we can take from that and apply it to our life. Any questions? Yes, Liz. Okay, wait for the mic.
So we'll go with the sight, and then the object of the sight, and then the cognitive piece, the tripodic. Yeah. That's the juncture. Mm. And then so I'm walking down the street, and I see something that I don't criticize everything I see, but there's something that something or someone I see, and maybe I don't like the way they're dressing, and that's just like an automatic thing.
Yeah.
So sight, object of sight, cognition, I know that I'm doing that. Mm-hmm. So the juncture, how do you stop yourself? You just stop your...
Well, how do we practice it? So first we've got to practice in situation in which we just set aside a time in our meditation. We're just meditating, something innocuous, like blade of grass, and just practice that. So we can familiarize with what actually comes up. We can expose all the things that come up. We're just being aware, giving space. Right? And staying with the freshness of seeing. See if we can do that. In actual daily life, in which we're just walking down the street, there are occasions in which we can't just freeze and just stop. Hold on a second. Let me get back to you. Right now, I have to relax, just see, bracket my judgment. We don't do that. Right? Most often, if we're familiar enough, sensitive enough to all the things that we carry and we project on the world, when we see something adverse, right, potentially danger or something. Or favorable, right? We're aware of what comes up. We just relax it. The most important thing is, just like what we do in the sitting meditation, we see something, relax into it, right? That's the second stage. Relax into it, don't give it a name. Just allowing it to be, right? All the stages that I said before. Same thing, if we're familiar enough in this process in daily life, when we expose what's happening, then we can make a decision whether to proceed or just, well, give it a chance, bracket this a little bit. Bracket it, and then continue to go. Use your common sense. Right? But usually this happens so fast at an automatic response that we're just not familiar. So we have to familiarize this process of exposing, relaxing, grounding, and being. Right? It's like learning how to play tennis. We don't start with someone who's an expert. We gotta play against the wall first. Just get your strokes down first, right? And then when you meet someone, then you actually improve. Because the wall doesn't bounce back. It just bounces, right? Other people, they have other stuff up their tricks, up their sleeve. They kind of do the backstroke like this, So those are the live circumstances in daily life. If we just keep to one principle, we do our meditation, right? Of course, seated meditation, but in daily life, we don't make separations. Basically the same. And where they converge is junctures. How we react to wandering thoughts, how we react to all the stuff that comes up in meditation, it's exactly the way we respond in daily life. How we react to our wandering thoughts, things that we don't like, or things that are favorable, blissful states, it's exactly how we treat people that we like or don't like. So in the seated practice of, and activity practice, the convergence is that juncture, exposing. Right? So the more we're familiar with this, it will start to carry over. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Hi. Thanks for answering my question. So something I noticed, I understand the juncture is everything, and I can appreciate the piece that's associated with looking at something, say a light. It's not, don't think in terms of a name. Don't think of it in terms of good, bad, don't think of anything. It's just that spatial reality, and it's both very passive and very active. And like I see the peace in that, I see the autonomy in that. I and the light, we're all connected. When it comes to understanding or thinking about things or interacting with the world, though, that's through language. It's not through images. So I feel like that act of looking at something without judgment and recognizing the juncture, I don't see how you extrapolate that beyond yourself, because the mere act of discussing it with language, you're coloring it.
Yeah.
You're judging it through your own lens. You're judging the other person how they need to hear it. So it's just one of those things where, as I understand it, it's like it's for me, because of the mere act of giving it words or even thinking about it, I'm losing that pureness of the juncture. So it's really just like
how to translate to other more complex situations where we use language.
So yeah, that's my question. Is that the right way of thinking? Is language like allowable?
Yeah. So this is only one sense faculty, right? Rudimentary, we start with sight or sound. But then we practice with other ones. The most difficult one is mind and its object, right? Which is symbolization. Whether visually or linguistically, the mind can construct its own object, right? So that's part of the practice too. So we first start with baby steps, then we engage with, words and language. But just like in the baby steps, we are practicing being in the immediacy of experience, right? And the freshness of that experiencing. Same thing can be done with words and language. Most people are locked, tethered to words and language. So there is actually no creativity. They only think in a particular pattern. They can only think in a particular pattern. But if you learn to free yourself from this particular pattern, then you can actually use words and language and see multiple ways, multiple things. The words and language become a playground. Right? So a lot of Chan masters, they're very good with words. And Chan says one of the axioms is not dependent on words and language. But in reality, in the Buddhist canon, the Chan Zen tradition produced the most amount of words, most amount of commentary, most amount of discursive, teachings. But the way that they express, very creative. Think about the wordplay and stories of koans. Those of you who don't know, you can kind of look it up. But the performativity of words. Words is not dead act. Words is not mere reflection of some idea or genesis of idea, but words as kind of alive and causative. Opening up new ways of seeing things. So Chan, it's all about that. But sight and sound is the beginning step. So words, there's nothing wrong intrinsic with words. Right? We're just so tethered to it that we can't see other possible ways of seeing it. Most people's relationship with words is, if you think of something sad, you just become sad. You think of something happy, you just becomes totally elated. So the feelings are completely tethered, tied to it. So God forbid you start thinking of something bad, then what happens? Depression. So the ability to free yourself from words is the first step. And then we fully engage with words and language. And allow the wondrous display of creativity to manifest through words. Yeah. Any questions online for the Zoomers? Are they allowed to unmute?
No, but they can type.
Yeah, if you have questions, you can type your questions. Meanwhile, if they have questions, they can type. Meanwhile, everyone's okay? Yeah. What did you get out of tonight's talk? Sight. Practice at the junctures of sight. Anything else?
I think there's a lot of peace in that moment.
A lot
That's
of.
the one thing you can really kind of give yourself, is the peace of not giving yourself judgment with anything. It's just,
The peace in that moment of just being,
yeah.
seeing. There's peace all around. Liz? Everything is not as it seems.
Create the thing that it seems to be
Yeah.
from yourself.
Yeah, we create the things that we see a lot of times, right? I talked about a couple of my students. We all do it. All of us walk around with stories, me included. Right? So I see it, old friend, okay, see you later. I'm gonna see this for what it is, best of my ability. If we don't see it, miss the opportunity, then we're hijacked. Hijacked by whatever's going on. The question's formulating.
What do you do then?
Hijacked?
Yeah.
You relax. Well, you see it, which is very good, right? So you can see it, you can pat yourself on the back. All right. So what happens when you see an old friend? It's like that. Some of these old friends, they come into your house, they don't even need you to open. They're so familiar with you. It's like, have a seat. Don't want to throw them out. You don't want to hurt them because they're you. You don't want to suppress them. You don't want to follow them. Let them dictate. You're the host. They're the guest. Right? So be a host. Have a seat. The kitchen's over there. Help yourself with this. Yeah, you can do you. I do me. Right? That ability to not succumb or be subjected to the learned pattern. That's practice. Don't make a thing out of it. The attitude is grasping, rejecting, craving, aversion. With regard to the host. With regard to the guest. Right? You see it? Okay. Because all of us have lived a life in which we have accumulated these things. It's almost as if it's like automatic. It's almost as if there's nothing wrong. It's just a tape recorder. When I grew up, there's still tape recorders. 8-track. So what's that? So it just runs. So first, see it. Relax. You ground. You see what's going on. You don't have to follow. You don't have to suppress. You see what needs to be done, what can be done. Concretely, the advice I give is physically relax. So you diffuse the somatic reactivity. There's a physical component to how we feel and how we perceive things. There's always a physical component. And it's usually tense. So if you relax it, you can also relax the hold that we have to these guests that come. So if you relax, feel grounded, then it's all good. Yeah. Some of these reactivity may be quite useful. Quite useful. Some of the words and language that we label may be quite useful. Sometimes we need to label. We need to label the problem, the issue, and then we can solve it. But you're in a better place when you're not tethered to it. Yeah. No Zoomers? Questions? Okay. All right. Have a good evening. See you soon.